Welcome in. Today's deep dive, it's a wild one. History, mystery, and maybe a little bit of the occult. We're looking into the life of Paschal Beverly Randolph. You might not recognize the name right away, but believe me, his story, it's one for the books. And you know we've got a ton of great stuff to go through from you all. Articles, notes, and there are even whispers of a connection to President Lincoln himself. So yeah, some seriously intriguing stuff in here. Buckle up, everybody.
What I find captivating about Randolph is how his life intertwines with some really pivotal historical moments, right? But it also delves into these esoteric practices that most people wouldn't associate with 19th century America.
Right. We're talking about a time when, spiritualism was gaining traction, but Randolph seems to be operating on like a whole other level entirely. But to understand his story, we got to go back to the beginning. His childhood. Picture New York City. And not just any part of it, we're talking about the Five Points neighborhood. That place was rough and tumble, to say the least. And that's where young Paschal grows up, navigating all that chaos. He even ends up in Bellevue at one point.
And it's within the walls of Bellevue, at just 5 years old, that he has this incredibly vivid, life-altering vision. And this isn't just, your run-of-the-mill vision. This thing reveals past lives, a debt owed stemming from a king's betrayal of a young poet. He's haunted by this woman, a woman named Flora, who we later find out is his mother. And get this, she died under some very, very mysterious circumstances.
Okay, whoa. Hold on for a second. Did you say a curse? Past lives. Visions at 5 years old. We're already in deep, folks. So this Flora figure, she's central to this curse he's carrying.
Precisely. The vision hints at this repeating pattern. Betrayal, violence, it keeps happening. Flora, with her royal African lineage, becomes a major point of contention. It's like this twisted mirror image of the poet's love for the king's daughter in a past life. And understanding this repeating theme, it's crucial to understanding the entire trajectory of Randolph's life.
It's like he's carrying the weight of this past betrayal playing out again and again, and it all goes back to a vision he has as a kid. Heavy stuff. But his story doesn't stay contained to Bellevue. He goes from street kid to experiencing life as a cabin boy. Talk about a change of scenery, right? He even has a near drowning experience.
And that near-death experience, it's like it awakens something in him, amps up his sensitivity to what he called, and I'm quoting here, the unseen. We start to see him exhibiting some unusual abilities, clairvoyance, communicating with spirits, even reports of him moving objects with his mind.
Okay, now we're talking full-blown psychic abilities. And I know from the research that you sent, this is where that mysterious mirror comes into play, the one that belonged to Flora. What's the story there?
Yes, the mirror. It becomes this incredibly important tool for Randolph, a conduit for channeling spirits, for accessing visions. But even he believed the mirror itself wasn't inherently magical. Think of it more like a tool, an antenna, that helped him focus his already heightened senses.
So it wasn't like, some enchanted object from a fairy tale, but something that amplified his existing abilities. Kind of like having perfect pitch, but you need an instrument to translate that into music everyone else can hear.
Precisely. And as his talents develop, he attracts the attention of a very secretive organization. They called themselves the Order. And from what we can gather, they were really interested in the occult. They saw the potential for it to influence, everything really, even the fabric of society.
Right.
And this is where he crosses paths with, of all people, a young Abraham Lincoln.
Wait, the Abraham Lincoln, Honest Abe, President Lincoln.
That's the one. See, even before his presidency, Lincoln was known to dabble in spiritualism, so it makes sense he'd be drawn to someone like Randolph. And the Order. They were ambitious. They wanted to shape political events. And in Randolph, they saw an opportunity, a way to leverage his abilities for their own agenda.
Okay, so we've got a secret society messing around with the occult, a future president looking for guidance from the spirit world, and Randolph stuck right in the middle of it all. What could possibly go wrong, right?
Well, here's where it gets even more wild. Lincoln, grappling with these premonitions of death, not to mention the heartbreaking loss of his son, he turns to Randolph for comfort, for guidance.
Wow. It's just amazing to think about. I mean, this is Lincoln, this towering figure of history, and he's seeking advice from someone who, let's face it, was considered a bit of an outsider.
And it's during one of these encounters, them gazing into that very mirror, that they receive a chilling prophecy. A citizen, not yet a citizen, will assist as you lead two nations into one. It foreshadowed not only the Civil War, but also the significant role Randolph would come to play in it. And then, like some kind of echo of that prophecy, the nation is ripped apart by the Civil War. And Randolph, He's not just a mystical figure anymore. He becomes a pivotal figure in the fight for emancipation.
So we're not talking about some, armchair mystic observing from a distance, but someone who was deeply involved in one of the most consequential periods in American history.
Absolutely. This is an aspect of his life that often gets overshadowed. He was truly deeply invested in the fight for emancipation, working alongside prominent figures like Frederick Douglass. There are even accounts of him advising Lincoln directly on the complexities of black enlistment. Can you imagine those conversations?
A mystic, an abolitionist, an advisor to President Lincoln. Randolph was definitely a man of many hats, but I can't imagine it was easy for him to navigate that world, especially given his background and the rampant prejudices of the time.
You're right, it certainly wasn't a walk in the park. He faced so much resistance, even suspicion from some black leaders who just didn't trust his methods, questioned his motives. Think about that, stuck between a society deeply rooted in its prejudices and then on the other side, a community skeptical of your intentions.
It's a stark reminder, isn't it, that progress isn't a straight line. Even people fighting for the same cause can be divided by mistrust, by completely different approaches. He was walking this incredibly precarious tightrope, trying to balance his own aspirations with this larger, incredibly significant fight for equality. Sounds like the prophecy was playing out, but definitely not without a fair share of bumps in the road, heartache even.
And it's here, at this point in his story, that things take a darker turn with what we're calling the New Orleans incident. Randolph has an encounter with Madame Delphine, a figure shrouded in darkness, disturbing rumors, and he witnesses something truly horrifying.
Yeah, Madame Delphine, right. I did some digging into her story, and let me tell you, it's the stuff of nightmares. Cruelty, dark rituals, all kinds of unsettling whispers associated with her name. What was Randolph doing mixed up with someone like that?
It's still a bit of a mystery whether Randolph sought her out intentionally or their paths just happened to collide. But whatever the reason, their meeting had a profound impact on him. He was deeply shaken, questioning everything, his purpose, his path. It's as if that curse he'd been tricked to outrun was finally catching up to him.
That sends chills down my spine. It's like stepping into a gothic horror novel, all shadows and whispers. How does this encounter, this Madame Delphine encounter, connect to that curse, to those recurring visions he had?
Well, this is where those fragmented images from his vision, the king, the young poet, the brutal execution, they become crystal clear, almost unbearably real. The line between his past lives and his present reality begins to completely dissolve.
So he's forced to confront the darkest parts of himself, the echoes of actions from another lifetime. Was he losing himself in all of that, or was it like this brutal moment of self-reflection for him?
It's the question that hangs over this entire chapter of his life. We see him wrestling with intense guilt, a sense of responsibility, the very nature of his visions. Was he destined to repeat these cycles of betrayal and violence? Or could he break free?
Talk about an existential crisis. But even with all that inner turmoil, his drive to make a difference, to uplift his community, it doesn't fade. In fact, his political ambitions, they seem to grow stronger. What fueled that, do you think?
It seems that despite all the setbacks, Randolph clung to another prophecy, one that hinted at his own rise to power. He truly believed he could be a leader like Lincoln, someone to guide his people toward a brighter future.
So he's driven by this deep-seated belief in his ability to create real change, to right the wrongs he witnessed. It really makes you think about that line, that blurry line between ambition and genuine altruism. But we also know that his methods weren't always, how should I put this, traditional.
That's putting it mildly. His desire to empower his community, it was very real, but his methods, they became increasingly controversial. His ego was a major sticking point, even causing friction with his allies. This was not a man who shied away from shaking things up.
The classic double-edged sword of a charismatic leader, right? That same passion that sparks movements can also lead to conflict and division. And then there's that whole debacle with the Lincoln pilgrimage. Accusations, betrayal, it all seems to just fall apart.
The pilgrimage, it was meant to be this grand event, a tribute to Lincoln's legacy, an opportunity for Randolph to connect with his supporters. It's time to shine, you could say.
It sounds like it was meant to be his moment, this culmination of everything he'd experienced and aspired to be. What happened? Why did it implode so spectacularly?
It really was a public spectacle. The accusations mostly centered around, well, let's just say, some questionable financial dealings. He was pretty much pushed aside by the event organizers, even targeted with, I'm sorry to say, some pretty awful racist attacks in the press.
It's like the very prejudices he dedicated his life to fighting against somehow conspired to undermine him. The more he tried to rise above it, the more entangled he became. What a story.
And remember, this is all happening during Reconstruction. A time of incredible hope, yes, but also intense volatility and, let's be honest, real danger, especially for someone like Randolph.
Right, right. A good reminder that history isn't just something you read in a textbook. It's the lives of real people, full of complexities and contradictions and all those messy details they leave out of the history books. But what about Randolph's death? That's the biggest mystery of all, right?
Yeah.
Was he murdered like some people believe, or did he really take his own life?
Isn't that the beauty and the frustration of history? We rarely get those clear-cut answers. We're left with these pieces, fragments of lives lived, and we do our best to assemble them, to find meaning. And Randolph's story, well, it definitely doesn't fit neatly into any box.
He was a complex man, full of contradictions, driven by this desire to uplift his community while battling his own personal demons. It's a good reminder that history is filled with these forgotten figures, people who challenged the status quo, lived extraordinary lives, and whose stories, well, they still have the power to fascinate us centuries later.
It makes us question everything, our beliefs about the world, the limits of what's possible, and those strange, often invisible threads that connect our past to our present.
It's a powerful reminder that even the most gifted among us, the ones who dedicate their lives to making a difference, can be haunted by their past. And sometimes the path to redemption is one we must walk alone.
It's certainly given us a lot to think about. What stands out to you from all of this?
The idea that our past lives, if you subscribe to that belief, can have this kind of hold on us, that our actions have consequences that can ripple through time. It's both fascinating and, honestly, a little terrifying. And it definitely makes you think twice about your own life, about the legacy you're creating. What will people say about us centuries from now? What impact will we leave on the world? It's something to think about, isn't it?